Will the Minnesota Vikings trade for Dexter Lawrence? That in itself is a complicated question because there are hurdles that you may not even be aware of that exist in order to facilitate a trade. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about an intriguing option at 18th overall that, to be honest, I really have not talked about much at all. We're going to talk about those things and why he makes sense for a Kyler Murray future. And then we'll finish up with the 7-round Vikings mock draft. And we're just 17 days away from the great get together, the annual selection meeting. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Real Forno Show, your go-to spot for everything Minnesota Vikings. Hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness, the beat writer and NFL draft guru for A to Z Sports, bringing you the sharpest breakdowns, film study, analytics, draft scouting, and unfiltered takes on your beloved Vikings. Whether he's diving into the latest roster moves, pre-game outlooks, post-game reactions, or hunting for the next big prospect in SKOL search, he's got you covered from every angle. So buckle up, Vikings fans. Let's get into it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave. And we have quite a bit to talk about tonight, as always seems to happen on Mondays, because the Minnesota Vikings never fail to give us something to discuss. And quite frankly, they're not even the topic of discussion here. And the topic of discussion is that Dexter Lawrence has finally requested a trade. We talked about it 2 years ago during the 2024 season when the Vikings had a really good start to the year, but things just didn't work out for the Giants, and people were talking, hey, maybe Dexter Lawrence trade. And I put water on it at the time because I'm thinking to myself, well, they literally just extended Dexter Lawrence. Why in the world would they trade him? And that ended up coming to fruition. They really didn't entertain trade talks then or in 2025 because Dexter Lawrence was such a key part of that defense. Now, well, things have changed as Dexter Lawrence went to Giants brass and firmly requested a trade. For the reason being, the same reason why Jonathan Gennard was exploring potential trade options. He wants a raise and can't agree on one with the New York Giants. Beat writer for the New York Post has talked about a 4-year deal worth $110 million, the same one Travon Walker got. So basically $27.5 million a year. Connor Hughes of SNY said about 3 for 81, which is $27 million a year. So that's kind of the range we're talking about. It would be the second highest paid defensive tackle in the National Football League, with the only one higher being Chris Jones, and he's kind of an outlier, $31.75 million. Second place is Milton Williams and Jordan Davis at $26 million. So even there, it's an interesting one because you have to ask yourself the question, is Dexter Lawrence worth that kind of money? And then once you answered that question, it all depends on what kind of defense you have and how much you prioritize a player like Dexter Lawrence, which every defense can use him, but it's about cost. That's going to be the whole conversation with Dexter Lawrence is cost. Not only are you going to have to trade multiple draft picks for him, you're also going to have to pay him. That's one of the reasons why the Jonathan Gennard deal has not gone through yet, because nobody wants to pay him what he's asking for. Now, would it behoove the Vikings to end up making the trade? Your mileage is going to vary, and it's going to really determine on which individual person you're talking to. But the one thing we can agree on is this. If Dexter Lawrence ended up a member of the Minnesota Vikings, he would be a dominant force on the interior of that defensive line. Look, this team does not need a nose tackle, and I don't know how many people need to hear it. Last year, they were good against the run, and in some ways, better against the run than when they were the second-ranked rush defense in 2024. It's because they faced nearly, 200 more rushing attempts last year, that a lot of the other stats were rough. Now, EPA and success rate were both worse than 2024. Yards per carry was less than 2024. So I'm not sold that the Vikings need to prioritize a nose tackle, especially because they allowed one singular point more year over year, and the passing defense improved from 26th in league to 2nd. I'd rather have an elite pass defense and take my chances with a slightly above average rush defense. To me, that just makes all the sense in the world. Now, Dexter Lawrence is a different kind of player because not only is he a nose tackle, he's a pass rushing nose tackle. He consistently gets over 50 pressures a year as a nose tackle. And from 22 to 24, had more than 70 more pressures than the second ranking player just when lining up at either 0 or 1 technique. 0 being directly over the center, 1 you're shoulder to shoulder with the center on either side. So the idea that Dexter Lawrence can't help at any defense would be absurd. He can help every single defense. The real catch is, how much are they going to help your defense for the cost to pay them? Now, the Vikings would have to give him an extension. It would have to be a market level extension. And you're going to part with at least a second and a fifth kind of trade. More likely a first plus. And so much of that is going to depend on the market. Those numbers kind of come from Connor Hughes of SNY, who's very plugged into both New York teams. So would you be willing to give that up? And then would you be willing to pay for a market level extension? Let's say the answers to both of those are yes. There's a major problem that's going to prevent the Vikings from making that trade. They literally cannot make that trade right now. Here's kind of how that looks. The Vikings have to have the salary cap space to absorb the initial trade. Not before it has to happen, before an extension. So they have to be able to absorb $20 million in salary cap space. Unless the Giants in the trade decide to eat a bunch of cash, then you could make the trade and then you could extend him. Until then, the Vikings would have to clear over $15 million in salary cap space just to bring him in with a trade. So right now, it is impossible for the Vikings to make that trade unless, one, they're shipping away Jonathan Grenard and then extending Brian O'Neill. That's just to create the cap space. And then once you have that cap space open, then you can lower his cap hit, which is $20 million for a team acquiring him this year and $22 million in 27. Relatively reasonable cap hits for a player of his caliber. But you're going to extend him, so those cap numbers are going to change. But even just to bring him in with a trade, you have to clear over $15 million in salary cap space. And quite frankly, that in itself right now is just not doable unless you do the two things I mentioned. Grenard, it's possible he could get traded over the NFL draft. He won't get traded to the New York Giants because they don't need edge rusher. They have Brian Burns, who's a top 10 paid edge rusher, and they have Abdul Carter, who they just picked at second overall. Plus, they're trying to trade Kayvon Thibodeau. So having Grenard go to the New York Giants in a trade makes zero sense. You can't tempt them with a player like J.J. McCarthy because they just selected Jackson Dart. And then you have the issue of, well, now you have to trade high-quality draft capital in order to go get Dexter Lawrence. To me, one of the biggest flaws of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and to me, the biggest reason why he got fired, wasn't the overall draft success. It was the fact that he made 2 picks across 3 years on day 2. And both of them were at 102nd overall. That's a problem. That's a big problem. You have to have your core built in the NFL draft. It is exceptionally difficult to build a core without picks 33 through 100. And those 2 picks that were in the third round were compensatory thirds, 102nd overall. So building the depth of a roster is nearly impossible to do when you don't have those picks at all. Now, when you introduce a guy like Dexter Lawrence, yes, you bring in a great player. Yes, you have to figure out the salary cap and contract issues. But now you have to deal with less draft capital. And the whole point of draft capital is to have low-priced players at starting and depth positions to ease it up with the salary cap. As much as Dexter Lawrence would help this team, I think it would behoove the Vikings to say no and just go into the NFL draft and just draft a bunch of players and build the depth of this roster. Dexter Lawrence would have been a great trade in 2024 when you were really building toward a real Super Bowl run. You had a big need at defensive tackle, and theoretically, it could have been the final piece toward building a championship. That would make a lot of sense in the world. You were in a position to make that kind of move. Where the Vikings are at right now, where you have all these depth issues, I don't think they're in a position to make that kind of move. I don't think it would be a smart decision to trade a couple of high-priced assets when it comes to draft capital to then go pay a market level deal, albeit to arguably the second best defensive tackle in football. But I don't think the Vikings are in that position anymore. It's likely going to cost you a first plus, which is a significant asking price with where the Vikings are at trying to build the depth of this roster. And it sucks to say no, but I just think it would be bad business to trade for Dexter Lawrence. Dave, your thoughts?
Boy, you're pissing in everybody's Wheaties tonight.
That's fine. I'm not trying to piss in anybody's Wheaties, but I am trying to be honest. That's the whole point of this network, is honest, thought-provoking, driven analysis. And that's what they're getting tonight.
Now, I remember going into free agency, you, Luke, everybody says, with the maximum moving around money, we could free up like $150 million. We did not do the maximum moving around money.
It was just over 100, not 150.
Okay, whatever. But we did not do that. There are still moves. Obviously, O'Neal is one of them. I think Dexter Lawrence would be great in Brian Flores' defense, his system, the way he works it. He could play 0, 1. He could bounce out to 2 or 3. I think it'd be wonderful to see.
Yeah.
I would love to have him in purple. I think it'd be like having Fat Pat back. Pat Williams. And he's gregarious. He's, a good, what seems to be a good person. I love his personality on the field. I think he would be great. Big says, even if you have Lawrence, you're still short another defensive tackle. Well, are we? Or are we still developing other guys like Levi, Drake Rodriguez, etc.? But I understand we want to draft young, build, all that sort of stuff. But when you have the opportunity to take a guy that's the second best at his position in a position that is rare to find somebody that good, it's hard to say no. And why wouldn't you? That makes you wonder if Brzezinski in his cap role could make something happen. If Brian Flores said yes, and obviously KOC said yes, let's do this. But like you said, it's going to be up to the market, and I believe the market's going to be strong. I believe the New York Giants are getting all sorts of phone calls as of today. And probably from the 3 other teams in the NFC North, because they all could use them.
Yeah. Like I said, though, it's unless you're moving on from Grenard and O'Neal, that's pretty much all you can do from a salary cap standpoint. You've done everything else. You've adjusted Hawkinson. You've adjusted Aaron Jones. You restructured the likes of Jefferson, Darrisaw, and Byron Murphy Jr. The only salary cap space you can clear is maybe an extension for Blake Cashman. The most you're going to be able to clear is a few $1 million. That's not going to get you anywhere close. O'Neal, you can realistically clear around $15 million with an extension. Grenard trade is clearing 12.1. Outside of that, there's nothing else you can do with this roster.
Yeah, but
nothing.
The Giants don't need an edge. They're not going to take Grenard.
No. That's not my point. I'm saying you have to make those moves first before you end up making the move for Dexter Lawrence. You have to clear that cap space. Now, you could potentially trade O'Neal in a package to go get Dexter Lawrence, but then you're just creating a massive hole at right tackle, which is arguably more important than having a guy like Dexter Lawrence on the interior. So
I agree there. Because you would say you take that number 18 pick, you'd go for a tackle at that point to replace O'Neal.
And that's awful business.
Yeah.
It's awful business.
I'm just saying, I like the idea of having Sexy Dexy on my team, but I think so does 31 other teams in this league.
I mean, that's the
probably
big thing
32.
Here, the argument isn't that you'd want Dexter Lawrence on the team. We all would. He'd be great. And especially with how Brian Flores wants to use his defensive line. He wants them to get pressure. He wants to prioritize stopping the pass. And having a guy who's 320 pounds who also plays good against the run is salivating. The problem is it's just unrealistic for all the reasons above. There just is not the cap space. Now, if you wait until after June 1st, things clear up quite a bit because you get the $11.2 million from Jonathan Allen, and then you get $1.3 million from Harrison Smith. That will come on June 2nd. At that point, then you have a little bit more flexibility to make a move like that. But one, will the Giants be willing to wait that long? And two, will they want draft capital now instead of 27? John Harbaugh has been on record saying, hey, I want to win now. We're not going to mess around. We want to try and win right away. So waiting for 27 may not behoove the overall plan for the Giants. A lot of different factors need to be considered here. And quite frankly, the Vikings are just not in a position, unless they make a couple humongous moves, in order to even facilitate a trade. And at that point, if you make those moves, you still have to agree on a contract extension. You have to agree on compensation with the New York Giants, which in itself will be a difficult task. And you could always get the Giants to eat some cash. Like, they could just be like, hey, you upgrade that fourth to a second, and we will eat $10 million in cash right now to facilitate a trade. That is also a possibility. But the idea of acquiring Dexter Lawrence at this exact moment, if a trade were to happen before or during the draft, is unfortunately a almost zero possibility. And I don't want to pour water on anybody's cornflakes, but it's just not realistic. But that's why you come here. Honesty. No bullshit. No fluff. It's just not going to happen. And that kind of sucks because, hell, I'd love to have a guy like that on this team. We talked about it extensively in October of 24.
Oh, we did.
They just don't have enough flexibility with the salary cap without creating massive holes at other positions. And I don't see it as being good business for where the Vikings sit and how they need to build out the depth of this roster.
I'm looking at right now, effective cap space. I've got it sorted by. And the Vikings are in the red, but only $202,000, $203,000.
And they're going to get $12.3 million on June 2nd, which they can just wait to sign all their draft picks, and they don't have to worry about it.
And then you've got Panthers, Chiefs, Giants. They're at 3.6. And Bears, because you know the Bears want Sexy Dexy, and the Dolphins. But we do know how Sexy Dexy works and how he works versus a certain center we used to have that now plays for the Bears.
Yeah.
I would love to see him tear him up again.
It would be fun, but let's
Jordan Love. And
Sean makes a good question, asking if I'd be open to the first round pick in 27 rather than this year. Honestly, I'd hate that more because the way things are projecting, and the danger in projecting is it always seems greener on the other side. We talk about this a lot with the quarterback class. Oh, there's like 5 or 6 guys next year. That ends up being like 1 or 2 because you get a whole nother year of tape and you're trying to project forward, and projections are very difficult to do.
And guys get hurt and the whole works. Yeah.
Overall, I would prefer to hold on to 2027 capital because at nearly every position, it looks to be stronger next year than in this year's class. So theoretically, if somebody offered me a 2027 first and like a late second, like if the Atlanta Falcons package came this year, I'd take it in a heartbeat. Last year, I probably would have taken it too, but my theory is I don't think the Vikings were offered that package, which is why they didn't even have the opportunity to take it. I don't have that sourced. I'm not talking with confidence, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to say no to that, which would have them with 2 first-round picks this year. But I will say this. That package wasn't exactly unfair to the Falcons. It has aged horribly because of all the off-the-field stuff with James Pierce Jr., the player they took with that 26 overall pick. But they got the 100th overall pick, which they turned into Xavier Watts, and they maneuvered around the board. The Rams only moved down to 46, But because they got that 100th overall pick, it was a relatively balanced out trade. So your mileage will vary on that too. But overall, I don't even know if the Vikings were offered that deal. And that's the tough part with trades. You're like, oh, the Vikings should have taken that. How dare the Vikings not take that? You don't know. You don't know if they were even called about it. The Vikings may have just been like, hey, we're not willing to trade unless we're going down this far. And you know what? There's a good argument to be made that, hey, you shouldn't trade down as far as the Rams did. But the Rams made the move. They got their tight end, and now they have 2 first-round picks. One of them they sent to the Chiefs for Trent McDuffie. So, but yeah, Dexter Lawrence probably won't happen. Sucks, but it is what it is.
I just hate to see him go to the North.
I don't think he will. That's my guess. But the Bears do have a first and 2 seconds this year. But would it be smart for them to trade that much when they could just take Caden McDonald, who, albeit, is not the same player? But then you save 2 draft picks, and you don't have to pay Dexter Lawrence buku bucks. But with an emerging Caleb Williams, now would be the time to make that kind of move. So who knows? We'll see who even has genuine interest over the course of the next few weeks. Because right now, it's all pure speculation. There's no real confirmed interest from anybody. But I'll tell you this. Majority of teams are probably making calls.
I've already said that. They've got to be. I've seen on Twitter, about every fan base is going, hey, let's get him. But that's the fans.
Yeah.
And
that's a whole different discussion in reality.
How do you evaluate a known quantity, a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro, second best defensive tackle in the league, as you said, versus potential draft picks?
It's all about asset management. It's like think of it like a 401k. When you have your 401k, there are multiple different ways to invest that money. You can invest it in like safe assets like mutual funds. You can do low risk stocks. You can do high volatility stocks that can get you huge returns, but you can also suffer massive losses. It's in a similar conversation with Dexter Lawrence. You know exactly what you're going to get, but you're going to pay a humongous premium in order to get that. And paying that humongous premium can be a major deterrent to end up acquiring said asset. That's one of the reasons, like in theory, why the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. Because even if the poor person says they can identify that this is an incredibly successful business plan, I know this is going to make millions of dollars. But if you don't have the money to put in initially in order to start said business, it doesn't matter if that business is going to be good or not, because you can't even get it off the ground. And I think that's where we're at with this Dexter Lawrence discussion. If the Vikings had $20 million in cap space, I think my viewpoint on it would be a little bit different. Yeah, you'd still need to maneuver just a little bit in order to absorb that whole contract. But you could do so and not have to worry about, hey, now we have to move on from Jonathan Grenard and get Brian O'Neill's extension done immediately in order to even acquire the player, let alone pay the draft capital. So there is some merit to Dexter Lawrence is a known commodity, and the draft pick, it's like the Family Guy mystery box. Hey, why get a boat when we get the mystery box? It could even be a boat. There's merit to that. Now, like the Stephon Diggs trade, we look back at that a whole lot differently if we didn't end up with Justin Jefferson in that. That is a trade that would be looked at in infamy, like the Randy Moss trade when we got Troy Williamson. But you got Jefferson, so it balanced out. If you trade Dexter Lawrence, but the player that the Giants pick, let's say it's Peter Woods, and Woods becomes an All-Pro, well, then we could look back on it and be like, well, why didn't we just take Woods instead of Dexter Lawrence? Like, that would have been a much smarter move, because guess what? We got an All-Pro on a rookie contract.
Yeah, but the whole idea of Woods hitting on that rookie contract is a smaller percentage than the 100%. I'm not disputing that. The key is you're gambling.
It's gambling. It's asset management. You have to be able to pay that big asking price, which is the trade, and you have to pay the contract. that asking price is the biggest deterrent and why I don't think it'll happen. It's not saying that the player isn't worth the asking price. I think the player is worth the asking price. The problem is the Vikings can't afford it. They literally just can't unless they make those other two moves, which I would recommend strongly against. I would take Jonathan Grenard and Brian O'Neill over Dexter Lawrence. Plus, not only that, you're going to have probably a first-round pick and a third-round pick that you would have to send to the Giants. That's a part of the discussion too. The opportunity cost of everything you'd have to sacrifice in order to get him, which is probably 4 assets. So as great as Lawrence would be, as awesome as he would be in this defense, I'm punting on it. Now, you could easily just extend Grenard, which they should have done over a month ago. I argue they should have done it last year to avoid a Danielle Hunter type situation. Look, the guy was a borderline All-Pro. Just give him the raise now, because the raise you have to give him now is going to be cheaper than the one you have to give him in 1 to 2 years. But they chose not to do that. They chose to give that raise to Van Ginkel instead, which they could have just done both, but that's a whole nother discussion. And then you could save, like, let's say $15 million with Grenard and then $15 million with O'Neill. Keep both those guys and then facilitate a trade. That would be a little bit more appealing, but I still don't want to give up 2 high-quality assets in the NFL draft to get a player who then you have to pay market value for where this team is and what they need to do in order to fix the roster as a whole. I think this is a win now kind of move. And while the Vikings want to win now, and they should try to win now, you have to set yourself up for the future as well. And this would be anti-setting yourself up for the future. The Vikings should trade back in the first round, get one more day 2 pick, and then potentially get 5 starters for 2027 and 2028. I think that's the best move for the future of this team. But we'll see how they end up going and what ends up looking like for the Dexter Lawrence stuff, because this is all relatively new. That came out around 11:30 while I was on the
something this morning. Yeah.
Locked On Viking Squad show. So a lot can change even for the Vikings. As things sit right now, I would give it a 0.1% chance of happening. And that's unfortunate because Lawrence would rule in this defense and how they like to attack. But
he'd look great in purple.
Yes. He would. All right. I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us here live tonight. Bulldog, Sean, Chuck, Biggs, all in the chat, and a lot more of you. Thank you guys for joining. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell for all those notifications. A lot of draft stuff coming up. I just finalized my top 100 big board. We'll have a reveal of that at some point. That's going to be accompanied by an article at A to Z Sports with everything that you can take a look at. All Forno teams going to be revealed, and we're going to do a lot of NFL draft stuff between now and then, including a 7-round mock draft at the end of this show. So make sure you stick around for that. And remember, everything I hear via Rumor Mill will be in that special channel for all members in the Vikings First and SKOL Discord. But you have to be a paid member in order to get access to that channel. It is one of the few perks that we offer, and there is no guarantee when I will be able to share information. But usually when I'm able to share it, just ask the people in there. It usually comes fast and furious. It's just a perk. Hey, sometimes I may not be able to share for a month. Sometimes I'll share like 3 things in a day. It's just all when I get it and I'm able to tell you guys. So make sure you jump in there. Dave has the Discord link in the show notes. Make sure you join. I want to talk, before we get to the mock draft, about a player that I watched over the course of the weekend. Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. Initially, I was very lukewarm on the idea of Kenyon Sadiq. And the reason why I was relatively lukewarm on him was because, like, a tight end in round 1, man, I don't know. I would probably kind of stay away from that, which in itself is completely understandable because tight ends in round 1 don't have a super high hit rate, but they have become more and more of a priority in the NFL draft. And because they become such a priority, it's the why that I think is the most intriguing. Teams are finding way more success throwing the football with heavier personnel than ever before. And tight ends are becoming more and more athletic weapons up the seam. And Sadiq fits that bill. Now, he's not going to be like TJ Hawkinson, who's a really balanced pass receiver and a blocker. But what he is a guy who can attack up the seam with 4.39 speed, a 43.5-inch vertical jump, has great body control in the air at the catch point, and is an effort blocker. I can teach strength. I can teach technique, which his technique isn't terrible. It's improvable, but it's not terrible. He tries. He puts in effort when it comes to blocking, and I cannot teach that. So the idea of Sadiq is a fascinating one, but I want to point this out, which is a very interesting stat. Kyler Murray in 2024. This is from Sumer Sports, who charts every play based on formation and personnel and talks about like how successful they are. The Cardinals ran 50.77% 11 personnel in 2024. This was Kyler Murray's full year starting. He threw all but 2 passes, and Clayton Tune's 2 passes were in garbage time. So 0.01 EPA per pass, 0.1 EPA per rush. Makes sense. Lighter boxes theoretically, so rush EPA is going to be stronger. 12 personnel. This is out of just over 1,000 plays. 28.86% of the time. Passing EPA, 0.15, pretty good. 0.07 rushing, a little bit down, but still good. In 13 personnel, they ran it nearly 200 times, over 15.64%. Passing EPA, 0.56, and rushing EPA, negative 0.02. The whole idea with having heavier personnel isn't necessarily to run the ball. Obviously, you get bigger bodies in, you can move people, but the defense is going to put in bigger bodies in order to stop the run. Now, inverse pass, you have more weapons on the field. You're going to have more defensive backs, therefore stronger pass defense. But if you can attack with heavy personnel vertically, that can change the dynamic of what your offense is. And with Sadiq, you wouldn't have to have him be your tight end 1 or tight end 2 in year 1. You can have him as a tight end 3. You can put him in the slot as a flexed out F. You can do a lot of different things with him, and he can be your de facto wide receiver 3, but you're just using heavy personnel to get it done. That in itself can be a dynamic weapon for the Vikings, and then he could take over for TJ Hawkinson in year 2 because he's a free agent after 26. So now you've essentially helped Kyler Murray, who's the presumed starter, and maximize what he's good at. Plus, you prioritize for the future in replacing TJ Hawkinson. Thank you, Bleeding Purple, for becoming a member. And all of a sudden, now you're in a great spot moving forward with helping current and future needs. Sadiq is 25th on my board. 26th. I think he's a high second round grade, which at 18th overall, I think is perfectly fine in this class because you don't have a ton of elite level talent. I think if you could trade down and get Sadiq, fantastic. The conversation coming out of the NFL scouting combine when he jumped 43.5 inches and ran a 4.39 was this guy is not getting out of the top 15 picks. He might go top 10. But everything calms down after a few weeks at the combine and it settles into where it's going to be moving forward. I think Sadiq would be a great fit. I think he attacks in a more modern way with NFL offenses. I think he can do everything TJ Hawkinson does moving forward. And it can help you both short term with wide receiver 3 and a lot of heavy personnel sets, and long term as your future tight end 1. Is it your best pick? I don't know that. Your mileage will vary, and it all is going to depend on what's available at 18 from trades and personnel. That best pick might be a wide receiver, might be a defensive tackle, might be a linebacker, might be a cornerback, might be a safety. Who knows at this point? All I'm saying is Sadiq deserves to be in the discussion for the 18th overall pick for all of the reasons that I laid out. It helps you now, it helps you in the future, and it fills a need, which that developmental tight end is a need for this team. Ben Urasek didn't do enough last year. Gavin Bartholomew was hurt, but he was the 202nd overall pick, not exactly a heavy asset. You bring in a guy like Sadiq, who is a heavy asset in the first round, and all of a sudden you feel a lot better about your tight end moving forward. Is it your best bet? Like I said, your mileage will vary, and it may not be your best bet. But I think he needs to be in the discussion, and I don't think it's relatively controversial. Dave, what are your thoughts?
Unfortunately, I agree with you. I always say drafting a tight end for their next team unless they're prodigal. Do I think Sadiq is prodigal? No, but is he good? Yes. And could he play that wide receiver 3 role? I think so. And I think that would fit well in KOC's offense to have him do that, to line up in the slot or even wide if he wants to. I think the yak component of it with the 3 tight ends we have is very good. And then you throw in that we have the wee wit of one starting at quarterback, presumably, and he likes to throw to tight ends. Most quarterbacks do. They're big mattresses with arms. Mm-hmm. And you give him another one on top of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and I think the weapons in this offense would be still off the charts again, and then you're developing him. You're grooming him to take over the starting job when Hawkinson is no longer on the team. And that's fine. I think that's perfect. And then in the second year, he's going to have a bigger jump than he will be in the first year. So I'm cool with that pick. I think it'd be the highest we've chosen a tight end ever.
Well,
that I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
I can find that out right now. All Vikings all-time draft history, which I am going to bookmark it. Position,
but all
tight
the guys,
end,
Bartholomew and everybody else, they're all day 3 picks, and they generally do not pan out.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much love you give them. They may pan out on their second contract, but generally not on their first.
The Vikings have never taken a first-round tight end, if you can believe that. The highest they've ever selected a tight end is 19th overall. Hal Bedsole in 1964. They also selected the year prior in the 3rd round, Ray Pogge at 31st overall. Then Kyle Rudolph, 43rd overall in 2011. Jim Kleinsasser, 44th overall in 1999. And Irv Smith Jr. at 50th overall in 2019. So tight end historically has not been one that the Vikings have prioritized high draft picks. In fact, just looking at the top 100, they only have 9 players at the position in the top 100 across over 60 years of data. So 65 NFL drafts, the Vikings have only taken 9 top 100 tight ends. But the tight end position itself is evolving, which is why I think it might be a position that they're more willing to invest in now than they would have been prior. Is that going to come to fruition? Who knows?
Depends how the board falls, like you said.
And I think Sadiq is going to be a player that's worth consideration at the spot where I would have been less inclined with other tight end prospects. And especially in this class, he runs a 4.39, jumps 43.5 inches with a quarterback who loves to throw jump balls. You need a tight end for the future, and he's not going to be asked to play a massive role year one. Sign me up. That sounds like a good development plan. But we'll see how it ends up maneuvering. Speaking of maneuvering, Dave, it's mock draft
time. Welcome to Vikings First and SKOL's Mock Draft Mondays. Who will the Vikings pick? And who's your favorite choice?
Bingo, bango, bongo. It is mock draft time. Let's get it started. I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to, which I mean,
and big in the screen, Control Plus. And as Freddie says, isn't our draft focus on secondary or defensive tackle? And so, like we said, Freddie, it was all on how the board falls.
I would argue that unless that secondary player is so elite, you can't pass up on him. I would completely ignore secondary in round 1 because it is so deep. You could spend your next 3 picks on secondary and get 3 starters in either year 1 or year 2. It is very deep at corner. It is very deep at safety. There's a lot of talent available. So waiting could actually be a smarter move for the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm not saying you need to avoid it. I would consider avoiding it for those reasons. You have to play the board. You have to play the market. If the market has a ton of corners and safeties later, but not a lot of defensive tackles and tight ends that you really like, then wait on cornerback and safety. But it's all going to be how the board falls. And I'm interested to see how that board falls. And that's what we're going to do here. Start the board and let's kind of see how things go. Relatively chalk initially. I do like that there are AI trades. So you can actually
what's the smoke behind Caleb Downs? Can we talk about that Thursday?
Oh, give me a second. So what's really cool about the new patch in the simulator, you can actually see what the AI trades are. Kansas City sent 74 to move up 2 spots. Miami sent 75 to move up 2 spots. So the smoke with Caleb Downs, he hadn't been sent to the Vikings one time. Not once in the entirety of my mock draft tracker. Week 14, sent 3 times. One of those was a trade up to 10. The other 2 were sitting at 18. We can't rule out Caleb Downs falling. Spoiler alert, best player in the draft on my board. It's him, Jeremiah Love, and Sonny Styles are my top 3. They're separated by a total of 0.2 points. That's how highly I think of those guys. Arvell Reese is 4th. But Caleb Downs, he's special. He can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, but he's more right now, his knee or something like that?
That's unconfirmed. And that was just a combine medical red flag, which can mean everything and it can mean nothing. We don't know. It's
team wanting him to fall down the board to them.
No, that's not how that works. They're flagged by the medical staff for further evaluation. So the medical staff is hired by the NFL, and they are the ones conducting all the different tests and stuff. Then they flag it for, hey, we want more information. We want a second opinion. We want to do further testing. So what he was reportedly flagged with was a meniscus injury and a potentially degenerative torn ACL. But that's just a medical red flag. That's not a confirmation. So that could be a factor. It could be nothing. A to Z Sports did a lot of reporting on it, and their information was that Downs, everybody was comfortable with Downs' medicals, but nobody denied that he was red flagged. So I found that really interesting. But on an overall scale, Downs could fall just because he's a safety. Guys fall every year because they play safety. Kyle Hamilton slid to 14. Derwin James to 17. Guys fall because they play safety. And Caleb Downs, even in this class, might not be immune to that. So he's not available here. And what we do have available is we have Sadiq, Peter Woods, Avion Terrell, Casey Concepcion. Those would be 4 guys I'd really consider. They all play different positions. But now we can look at trade offers. We can go down to 21 overall and get pick 85. We can go down to 22 and get 86. I don't want to entertain going to 34, even though you're getting 3 picks to do so. But I think because there are 4 guys that I really like, we can move down 3 spots because we're going to guarantee to get one of them. So let's accept this offer from Pittsburgh, get the 85th overall pick. And Casey Concepcion is still there. So we'll look at the trade offers. Tennessee wants to come up. That's not a bad offer to get 35 and 66, but we're going to hold. We want to be able to take that first round caliber player because I don't think at around pick 35, we're going to get a guy that really fits what we want. Maybe Chris Johnson or Colton Hood, but I think Casey Concepcion elevates this offense to another level. So we're going to take Concepcion. And if you don't know a lot about Concepcion, go take a look at our SKOL Search episode where I broke down Concepcion for about 10 minutes. I really liked what he brings to the table. I think he can fill Jordan Addison's role immediately. And you're going to keep Jordan Addison. So all of a sudden, you just have 2 of those guys. Hell yeah, let's do it. 49, we do have offers to go back. We can go back 2 spots. We can go back 3 spots for a 5th round pick that's 2 spots lower. We can make another trade with Pittsburgh, who is offering us a 4th to move up 4 spots. That's one I'll consider. And then to move down 5 spots, we get to pick 5 spots higher in the 4th. So let's take a look at the board and see how much we want to maneuver. Kristen Miller is a guy that I would love. Look at that size. We haven't talked much about him at all. And I think we should be talking about him because he's a guy that you can get in the 2nd round, and he doesn't have a ton of pass rush production, but that's not abnormal for Georgia defensive linemen because they're asked to play hyper specific roles. They're not asked to be versatile players. So coming into a Brian Flores defense, that pass rush production could spike immediately. Lee Hunter's available too. D'Angelo Pons, he's got the size concerns, but 43.5-inch vertical leap. That eliminates some of those size concerns at the catch point. Jennings Dunker, I don't have in my top 100. He cannot move. He is stiff as a board. That's not somebody I want playing offensive line for me. Golday is an interesting, he's like, they played him at overhang, more of like a linebacker safety hybrid, but he's much more of a box player. So he's an interesting profile. Anthony Hill Jr., you guys can watch the SKOL search. I don't like him much at all. Jeremy Bernard's a guy I really, really like, but we took a wide receiver already. Connor Liu, I'll take that guy in round 3. I don't want to touch him at this point in round 2 because of the torn ACL. So overall, I don't love the board enough to move down. I think Kristen Miller makes a lot of sense here because I don't think a 5th round pick is worth moving down 2 spots and potentially losing out on him because this fills a potential pass rush upside pick while giving you somebody who can play the run on day 1. And I think he gives you more of that to you than Lee Hunter does.
And he costs a lot less than Dexter Lawrence.
Yes, he does. So now looking at the Vikings picks, we've got 3 picks in round 3. We have not touched secondary yet. Guess what we're going to do in the secondary? We're going to load up in the secondary. We can take corner, we can take safety, and we can feel pretty good about their future. Guess what? AJ Halsey, ball hawk. He's got the ability to play in the box. That kind of versatility is huge for how Brian Flores wants. You would love him to be a little bit more fluid in the hips, a little bit faster with some of his like burst and overall top speed when he plays like a center field. But guess what? He's versatile. He's smart. 2 things that are required to play for Brian Flores. AJ Halsey, pick 82. I think that's a steal. And guess what? 2 guys we weren't going to touch because Anthony Hill Jr., I think he's stinky. And Skylar Bell, we already took a wide receiver. We're not going to take another one this high. So now let's take a look at cornerback. We have not touched one yet. Cornerback is, I'm not going to say it's barren, but it's a little rougher than we would have hoped. It would have been nice to see like a Devin Moore here. But we have Amari Harvey who we can get in a couple of picks. So let's take a look at the overall board. Jadarian Price is here. This is a situation I think we have to prepare for. I don't think it's a guarantee. I think he's going to go in the top 40. I really do. But it's not a strong running back class, and not everybody's going to love him. But he's available, and this is one of the 2 running backs that I would realistically want to take, considering I've had the conversation already about I don't want to take a running back in this class because I don't believe in the guys outside the top 2, and I don't think you're going to get the top 2 guys. Well, guess what? Price is available. Smash. We'll take him. And now we're going to pick at 97, and I think you guys already know what cornerback I'm going to target because he is on the All-Forno team, and that's Amari Harvey out of Georgia Tech. I think he's going to be a really, really good player at the next level. I have a 3rd-round grade on him. I think he's going to be awesome. Charles Demings is a guy that if he falls to like 140, I would consider a trade up because he's an FCS. Oh, he's gone. He's an FCS guy, and he tested insane. Plus, his coverage tape, even though it said Stephen F. Austin, was really good. And you always take really good football players. So That's the spot where you'd want to take a risk on an FCS guy. But we still have 5 picks overall, and we've addressed 5 needs. So we can feel a little bit more comfortable branching out. We can look at what the board has to offer. A couple linebackers at the top. Deontay Lawson is somebody I really like. Look, he's not perfect. He doesn't have great top end speed, but springy athlete means twitchy, means he's going to get out of the blocks really good. And you do that, you iron out some of the deficiencies. You kind of help out. Well, let's find out. 6'3", 226.
Okay.
He's got the frame to add more weight and not give up a lot of.
He's a little light, but he's good size.
Good size. Bryce Betcher, that dude should probably go play baseball. He was a 13th round pick of the Astros. I think he's fine at linebacker, but I think if you're going to take a guy, I want a guy like Lawson, who I think I can develop into somebody who's a plus player. Betcher, I think, is a depth guy only. So now we've addressed linebacker with a guy who can be a depth player now, maybe rise into a starter. And guess what? That guy can also be a good special teamer, which you have to take special teams guys on day 3. So now we've got a linebacker, corner, running back, safety, defensive tackle, wide receiver. Not exactly a great board, but one player I'm interested in, John Michael Gillenborg. Only really played football for 3 years. He didn't really play football in high school, played it once he got to college. Very interesting. Huge speed, great frame, but really raw. Sky high ceiling kind of player. You want a tight end developmental guy? This is your developmental guy. Bring him in, have him compete with Urasek, have him compete with Gavin Bartholomew. And if he doesn't make the team, guess what? 6th round pick. Look, you don't love it, but it's fine. It's objectively fine. Now, we're going to have 3 picks in the 7th round. Guess what? We're going to have a couple of interesting players. I was hoping Spears Jennings would fall because he's somebody I'd like to invest in. We have not addressed the offensive line at all, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, because you can get depth offensive linemen in free agency still at this point to round out your depth, and you can get them relatively inexpensive, which the Vikings don't exactly have a ton of holes in the offensive line. You'd like to get a developmental center, but the way the board fell in this draft, it did not come to fruition, which that happens sometimes. So I think Matt Gulbin's an interesting one to develop. So we're going to take him at 234, 235.
And the Vikings let Justin School go. He was signed by the Bucks.
Mm-hmm. And they signed Ryan Van DeMark to take his spot. So, look, I don't think School was as bad as people made him out to be. I also don't think he was good. He was good for the price. Let's put it that way. He earned his $2 million. He was plenty good for what they paid him. But you don't sign a guy like that asking him to play. You don't. But Eric Gentry, wacky inflatable tube man, Tayshaun Prince of the NFL. I want that profile. I want to see what he can do in a Brian Flores defense, playing zone and being a mismatched defender on the back end. I want it. If it doesn't work, I get a good special teamer. If it works, it could be revolutionary for how the Vikings played pass defense. That I would put at about a 10% chance. But that 10% chance and being a core special teamer, to me, is well worth the risk. I would even consider him in around 6 because that profile is so fascinating. It could just be a disaster, but you're okay with that result with a round 6 pick because he runs a 4.54. He's got 35.5-inch arms. You can do a lot of things with him. So one last position. Look, I think Luke Altmaier is an interesting quarterback overall as a backup. You're drafting him to be a long-term backup. The Vikings just don't have a roster spot, but if they did, I think Altmaier would be a really interesting option here. Overall, look, a lot of wide receivers at the top here. Jalen Catalon, we're going to take him because
punters.
No, I'm not taking a punter. I think Catalon, look, he's a 6-year player. He was at 4 universities over the last 4 years. Not exactly a great thing, but that's also modern college football. It is what it is. So B+. Concepcion's a C. I would have preferred Peter Woods would have fallen there, but we got one of the 4 guys that I was targeting. A-, A, B+, C, A-, C. Like, we're getting solid grades here. A B for that trade.
How does the
go down 3 spots?
program grade it?
So it's grading mostly off value and position of need. We're working on a patch that the AI itself will generate it based on not just need, but how many players you pick. So if you hit your highest need is cornerback, you don't just take 8 of them and then they're all grading high because, well, you have a need at corner. So we're still working on patches, but already I think this is the best simulator in the business and it's going to continue to get better. So A2Zsports.com. Make sure you go check out the new simulator. And that is our show. A lot of really interesting things. We're going to have some really good discussion later in the week, kind of about how to prioritize some things for Kyler Murray, how if the Vikings are going to prioritize Kyler at all with how they select in this draft, which I think is another interesting angle. But we're going to have a lot more on Thursday. Who will be king will not be on this channel this week. It will be on next week. Make sure Dave will post the link to that in the post section. So make sure you click that. And then 2 Old Bloggers will be back on Sunday afternoon, 4:05 Central Time, unless Darren decides he's going to go on vacation and makes Dave change the time again. You never know with that Canadian. So there will be that. Plus, we're going to have more bonus shows throughout the course of the next couple of weeks. And this is why we always say like, subscribe, ring the bell for those notifications, because we're going to have a lot of great stuff. And it's going to be a lot of fun moving forward. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. 17 days till the NFL draft, baby. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.